Oops, not too straight. Well, you know, there's far more to it than hitting in just a perfect world. We also need to know how to get ourselves out of snags if we do hit them. And that does happen to all players. Players on the television that you see, all the way down to the beginning golfers. Sometimes you go out there and you just can't seem to find your game and you can't seem to find your impact. So I want to talk about troubleshooting because it's a very important part of learning to be a better golfer. Now, as we learn about troubleshooting, there's something that you must understand when it comes to impact. And that is when the club comes in properly, it's coming in very specifically. So what I mean by that is it's approaching on a certain angle, if you will, and swinging in a certain direction. So if I were to take a perfect shot and analyze how it worked, well, the club would come in a certain fashion. It's a certain direction, if you will, a certain height into the air. The club face is rotating in a certain fashion as well. Any deviation from that motion is going to cause a little bit of a different impact. So if I deviate from that a lot, all of a sudden I get a bad impact. And I need to know how to figure that out. So the way we do it is we have to be a little bit like a detective. You know, I have a student who is a detective, and I love saying that one to him. But we do need to be like a detective. And our clues are going to be the divot direction and depth and the way the ball flies. There are three factors that we need to study here, and that is the direction the club swings, the depth that it goes into the ground, and the club face. That first one, the swing direction. We talked about how the swing is a circle that goes around us. Well, and that means that in a perfect world, the club is going to tear out a divot just slightly to the left of our target. That's because it goes back around the corner, if you will. If that circle gets too much to the left or too much to the right, though, that's when we start mishitting. On a perfect divot, it's going to be ever so slightly to the left of your target, and that's what you want to look for. How far left? Well, on a 150-yard shot, it should be about 10 or 15 feet left of your target. So not 10 or 15 yards, just a little bit. If it deviates from that a great deal more, that's when you're having a swing direction issue, and the divot on the ground will tell you. Step back and take a look at it. Now, don't try and use your feel here. You can feel like you're swinging in one direction or the other, but the divot on the ground will tell you the truth as to what was happening. So take a look at that divot direction first. It will tell you where your swing direction is going. If the divot is way off, then you want to work on something that may influence the swing direction, like your stance, your takeaway, or the movement during the swing. But that's the door you would knock on. Now, how to know about the club face? Well, the club face isn't so hard to figure out. Just look at that divot on the ground and then compare where the ball is. If the divot is going straight down the golf course, but the ball's well off to the right, well, you know that the club face was well open. The opposite might be true. If you go ahead and make a divot that might even be to right field, but the ball is far to left field, well, now you know the club face was closed. And in trying to figure yourself out, you want to go ahead and do something that would influence the club face. Sometimes you need to do both, where you need to influence the swing direction and the club face, but at least you're knocking on the right door. Now, when it comes to angle of approach, the way the club goes into the ground, we do know that we need to make a divot when that ball is on the ground, but how deep? Well, basically, you're going to look for some dirt on the way through and maybe even a little bit of the roots. If you dig out all the way underneath it, that's going to be a little bit too steep into the ground, too sharp of an impact. So we want it to sort of skim the ground on the way through, catching that divot, catching the dirt, but not gouging all the way under the root structure. That's about the perfect depth. Now, if you do just see a little burn mark with a fairway wood, that's about right. You may see some dirt, you may not. But that's basically the angle of approach. So if you make a big steep angle where you're going to hit the ground super hard and it makes a big deep divot, well, now you can start working on that. You could imagine a swing that's too high in the air might hit the ground too hard, or if you're falling on it with your posture. Now, again, I want to be crystal clear that I'm not talking about the feel of the swing. Your feel can really trick you here, but the impact and the evidence that you have never will. So that's the way you want to go about it. You want to take a look at the evidence that you've been given. You know, you have the greatest teacher in the world with you whenever you play, and that's the golf ball. The golf ball won't lie to you. It'll tell you what's going on with your swing. Make sure to knock on that right door, if you will, so that you're picking on something that would influence the ball flight. You know, it's funny, even with people who slice the ball, I actually respect those that just plain old turn the club face in at address. It's not really the right fix, but at least they're knocking on the right door. They know the club face is open. Most people, when you ask them if they've got a big slice going on, you say, what's the matter? They say, well, it's my shoulder or my elbow or my knee, but it never dawns on them the club face is hitting wide open. So again, make sure to knock on the right door. Use that evidence. It's a big help.